So, once again, welcome to Vilenica 2020. Unfortunately, this year for the first time in virtual format. For the beginning, this debate will be really relaxed. The main aim is actually that you get to know each other and also that Slovene audience gets to know you, get some info about your work, and also get some information about the residency and nomad program. At the beginning, I will start with a little introduction, then we will move to the residency program that you're part of. Later on, of course, I will be interested in your own work as well, your own experiences. And in the end, I would also like to maybe ask you some questions about this year motto of Vilenica, and also just your personal opinion about everyday work, about Europe, where we are heading. The questions are structured in a way that anyone can answer them. Like I will maybe say, Mary, can you answer this? But all the questions are for everyone, that the debate can be more lively. So at the very beginning, just given the global situation nowadays, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, most of the literary activities are impossible or really difficult to organize. So I'm interested in the situation in your home countries. How did COVID influence your creation, also your travels and participations on the festivals? Maybe if...
Okay. I'm in Ireland, so and I had my latest novel came out at the end of 2019, so I was booked for lots of literary festivals around the country and in the UK and Britain. So Edinburgh, which is a big festival, they've moved some of it online, and Oxford. So earlier in the year, I did go to Frankfurt and to South America, to Colombia, to the Hay Festival. But I was just home at the beginning of the pandemic and all of the other festivals were cancelled. Just one, the one in Galway, Courch, they moved it online. They're doing what you were doing. But for the rest of the year, they were cancelled. Now, it's worse for the theatres and the performance arts, obviously, because everything is cancelled for them. And the participants are given a government grant or, government wage during the pandemic. But yes, it has affected us. As it happens, I'm at home anyway, and writers, it doesn't affect us too badly. We don't crave to go to festivals in general, or at least I don't. So the pandemic and the lockdown suits people who write. We haven't had huge changes to our lives in that sense, apart from witnessing the upset and the tragedy.
And how is the situation in Croatia, Sibila?
Well, almost the same. I was booked for a couple of months in advance. Once in lifetime, I had to read in Paris, in Brussels, and I had a new book translated into Spanish, so I was supposed to go to Guadalajara. And of course, nothing came out of it, but I'm not very much distressed with this very fact. As my colleague said before, I'm used to solitary work. And anyway, who lives on literature? And now the most important question is how to organize life for those who cannot earn their salary, like myself, for example, because I'm teaching at the Academy of Drama Art, and some of my colleagues are working in newspapers, or it's either journalism or teaching. But otherwise, for performing artists, it's an utter disaster. I mean, for us, we can postpone some of our activities. We can work on a new novel. I'm trying to do that because I was on a sabbatical, and I'm very grateful that this sabbatical year came right at the moment when I needed it, because I was ill for quite a long time, and then I needed some time for myself. you know, but I imagine it completely differently. And this is, for me, I'm in a sub-depressive state. I would say, I would explain that like this, because I feel depressed, I feel sad, I feel angry, and it's all mixed up. Somehow I feel, because I've been for quite many decades, I've been also I've been engaged in journalism and in pen matters, which means that that I was an activist. And right now it's very difficult to see what to do to change things. Is it possible to change things, or it's just doing some small work in my spiritual garden? And for now, I think it's doing my small work in my small spiritual garden, because I cannot do anything more than that. Although I'm prone to reading between the lines, I'm used to seeing the disasters before they come really to prominence, because people are just accepting things as they come. And they say, okay, it's a new normal. It's a new normal. We have to adapt to it, but we also have to change things, not only to adapt to it. That's for now. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say for now.
And how is the individual or like collective experience? What are the emotions in Spain, Elena?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the festival team. Thank you for your patience with me during this really difficult year. As you maybe know, the situation in Spain was really painful, is really painful and complicated. I think books and book fairs and festivals are in the second, third or fourth place. Luckily, neither my family nor my friends have had the disease, but we have had to stay at home for 3.5 months, and in many cases without seeing our loved ones, without saying goodbye to those who were dying, without supporting those who were ill. The coronavirus has been especially violent on the elderly, on those who suffered the dictatorship. We helped it to rebuild the country. It has been very, very, very sad and even unworthy. Now we are accustoming to not hugging, not kissing, to going out with a face mask, keeping our social distance. We live in a reality that just a year ago will have a like science fiction. And now we are wondering when we will recover that reality in which we live, and if even we will recover it someday. I think our priority now, they are in books or festivals, they are is life. I think that the situation is really serious, and I also think that sadly it's not yet over. We're reflecting on it calmly, not rushing it. I don't know how the pandemic will affect my writing. I don't know. Of course, during these months, I have had to put aside my work as a writer and focus on my work as a publisher, and also focus on my company, not writing. Many times I have wanted to write an article, to sketch some text, but I could only write down the idea due to lack of time, without returning to it later. What I write always has a strong political compromise. I always try to reflect on the social class and the feminism, and in Spain the pandemic and the crisis have affected in a very strong way not only the poorest population but also the middle class. I am sure that this will be reflected in my books, but I am also sure that I will be able to answer more clearly in a year or two.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how did like so-called new reality affected your creations, Yasin? Were you in Europe at that time when the pandemic started, or in China?
I was in Europe and I was home in Sofia. And I was very tired because I spent half of 2019 traveling, and I spent 3 months in Asia, in Taipei and in Shanghai, and then back to Europe. And then when I went back home for New Year's, I felt so exhausted, and I thought, okay, I'll take 2 months off, not travel. And then from March, everything will resume back to this crazy pace. And then the pandemic happened. And initially we had a very strong, unproportional response. So we had a heavy lockdown after 4 confirmed cases that went on for 2 months. And we were one of the countries with least cases. And then because of the economic pressure, I think all the measures were lifted, and they were lifted just from one day to the other, which now created a situation where we have 300 new cases per day, and it's quite scary. And of course, everything was cancelled. I work here with a residency for writers and dramaturgs called Radar Sofia, and we had our last resident in February, basically the day, 2 or 3 days before the lockdown, and she was from Syria. We had her reading, and then everything was locked down. She managed to leave through Athens, and then everything else, all the plans were cancelled. And I also work with a theater festival, and I do the programming, the international programming. We had an open call. We were selecting the artists, and then of course we had to postpone. We hope to make it happen next year, but I think this is still unsure and uncertain. And personally, I was supposed to teach, and I was supposed to go to festivals in Europe mainly, and to do some collaborations, but everything is on hold, cancelled, or postponed for next year.
I see. And now also Miroslav is joining us finally. We can ask him as well how he's dealing with so-called new reality.
Hi.
Miroslav, hi, welcome to Vilenica.
Hi, sorry. Yeah,
It is okay. We already started, and you're just in time that you share your experience about the situation, how COVID-19 affected the situation in your country or your personal creations.
Hi, everyone. The situation with COVID in my country is quite tough for most people. The question is the following: how to make for a living? Yeah, the economy of Ukraine was not on its top even before the pandemic. It definitely influenced the book industry because this industry is very fragile. At the beginning, we took part in many online events, but it got boring for me very fast and for many people. And as an author, I was not influenced with the COVID or quarantine. I even benefited because I got much time for my creative work, yes. But I also work as a teacher of creative writing at the university, and personal contact is a great part of my work, because I work with creation, yes, I work with future poets and prose writers, and the online format makes it this personal contact impossible. Yes, or almost impossible. And I will have near 90 students in September, yes, who enrolled in my course, and I still doesn't know how to solve this and find new ways to set emotional contact with them. That's why COVID is a great problem for me in this case.
Mm-hmm. I see. So we have like COVID in a way, like also brought us a bit together because we are sharing the same experience. And also there is another experience that is shared among all of you. And this is, of course, the residency program. You're this year a guest of Festival Vilenica, which is one of the leading European festival, and this year we are celebrating the university. But due to the current situation, as we were now talking, and as we are talking, we are doing it mostly in virtual world. What I'm interested in is some of you were already guests of Vilenica. For example, Sibila, you in 1995. Some of you are, it's your first time on the festival. What are your expectations and what did the invitation to Vilenica meant to you?
I think I should answer it first, because I was the one who was at Vilenica a long time ago, and I was so much enthusiastic about coming there again, and such a disappointment have to meet like this virtually. But never mind. Now nothing is the same. Nothing is the same. Today I feel particularly sad because when I came to Vilenica, another colleague of mine, Tonko Marojević, a poet, was with me. He came to Vilenica as well. He was invited, and he died yesterday at his island of Hvar. So it's just these circumstances that are making this Vilenica participation for me very, very difficult, because yesterday I was touched to the heart with the memories both of Vilenica and our time together there, and it's so sad, like nothing is the same anymore, both literally and of course, in these spiritual spheres, we have to find a sort of not new normal, but new new relevance in the spiritual way. But let me go back to Vilenica experience in comparison to other festivals that I've been to. I think it's a high quality festival, and I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed the programs which have, and I enjoyed meeting people. That's what I miss right now very much. I can compare it to Lodev. Lodev festival doesn't exist anymore. It's in another city right now, but it was also very nice. I can compare it to Canadian festival Trois Rivières, which I loved so much. I can compare it perhaps with Genoa festival, which I loved as well. But Vilenica, with the caves of Vilenica, is something special. So it gives this spiritual dimension to especially poetic readings. I'm aware that Vilenica is not only for poetry. It has had a long tradition of very good round tables, and it's for essayists as well. But somehow I feel like a poet when I'm here. I don't feel as a novelist, which I am as well. I don't feel as an essayist. I'm a poet when I'm here among you in Vilenica, even virtually.
We can't hear you, Aljaž.
You have to unmute.
Sorry, my mistake. I was on mute. I do apologize. Miroslav, I was asking you, I heard that you, for many years, wished to come to the festival Vilenica. You're also mute.
Yes, yes. I know this rule: when somebody talking, I mute. Yes, but online never replaced the live experience for me. I am an old-fashioned person in this way. But I am grateful to Vilenica for this opportunity. It's a big challenge to perform such projects now, when the culture is on the state of pause. Yes, and we must perform them because the situation with culture is like the situation with Alice in Wonderland. Yes, when you stand still, you move back. Yes, and some of my acquaintances and friends have been to the Vilenica festival previous years. For example, Anna Blandiana from Romania, who was awarded the Vilenica Prize recently. And last year we had a joint literary project with her. We had a 5-day journey to Central Europe, to Brno in Czech Republic, to Wrocław in Poland, and in other cities. And during that journey, she told me that Vilenica is a unique festival, one of the best. Yes, even for her. She saw, I think, everything. And a friend and colleague of mine, Yuri Andruchovich, who was also the Vilenica, awarded by the Prize of Vilenica. For example, Katerina Kaletko, Tanya Malerchuk from Ukraine, the authors who were the participant of Vilenica, they took place at Vilenica, and I really enjoyed the photos of the readings in Kiev, for example. It was something wonderful and really, really unique. I wish to take this experience. And about another interesting festivals for me, one of the best festivals I have ever been to was the Poetry Africa Festival in South Africa, in Durban, near the ocean. Yes, and we had, for example, reading in schools in slums. Yes, it's a completely new literary environment for me. And international festival give me new experience, and I'm lucky because it is always enjoyable for me.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Elena and Mary? You're often visiting also other festivals. What does it mean for you to be invited in Vilenica?
For me, means mainly the opportunity to discover. I was very interested, I am very interested both as a reader and as a publisher in Slovenian literature today. I know the work of Thomas Salamun, I apologize for my pronunciation, also Jana Putrles-Lirik and Urospera, I think. But I wanted to know more about contemporary poetry in Slovenia. I think it's one of the most fruitful traditions in Europe. Writing in Spanish, I have participated mainly in festivals in Latin America or in special sections dedicated to Spanish languages in European festivals. Then I was also expectant because of the possibility of listening to writers from other European countries. Mm-hmm.
Similarly, I have to agree with Elena there. You know, in the English-speaking world, we don't get enough translations, really, and that's a well-known problem. Things have improved in recent years. There are a good few smaller publishing houses like Fitzcarraldo in the UK who do translate a lot more. So I wish we had more access, and certainly going to festivals like this opens doors. You know, we get to mix. I haven't been to Central Europe, apart from being in Zagreb once for an the European Short Story Festival back, I think, in maybe 2013. But it was a lovely opportunity. You know, I would welcome more of this because it is the only way that it's the only way we get to know other cultures and other people. And if at the level of writers, especially, it's very important that we mix. It's very important that we learn each other's literature because it is the lifeblood of a society. And translation is vital. In Ireland, we have a body called Literature Ireland who work to translate Irish writers abroad. And through them, it's a government agency, and they liaise with say, different publishers in other countries, and they provide money and a grant. For instance, my first novel was translated into Vietnamese and Turkish with the help of this grant, and Spanish and or Dutch and Italian as well. But for the smaller languages especially, it's very important. You know, there's lots translated into English and Spanish and French, but it's the less well-known languages that are vital to get more publicity.
Yeah, this was also one of the questions that I wanted to ask everyone when we are already talking about translation and mixing the languages. This is, of course, one of the most important aspects of Vilenica as well, about providing as in a way, mediation between different languages. So in this situation, as Mary was already explaining, how their institutional grants for the translation, how is elsewhere with you in your countries with translation grants and institutional policies about these financial mechanisms and so on? Because of course some are coming from the bigger languages, but the most problematical here are of course smaller languages from periphery.
Yeah, in Croatia there is a little bit of it. Of course, translations are subsidized, partially subsidized by the government for especially for translating Croatian authors abroad. But I think it's not so very well developed as in some other countries. I have already seen it. For example, even I would say in Slovenia, it's much better organized than in Croatia, and it functions well. And I think I don't want to criticize now the policy in Croatia towards authors and books and promotion of Croatian authors, but I think there's much more to do about it in my country. Of course, there are some usual things, how you get translated and how your translators get subsidized for it. But it should be more organized than it is right now in Croatia. And it depends, of course, on the editors and on the agents, and the situation when you have the editor and the agent in the same person is not the ideal one, of course, for the author, and the author's rights are not very well managed. There should be some improvements concerning that. But let me go back to the opportunity that we listen to other poets in different languages. I think it's a very good idea to also have translations into languages of lesser frequency. Not only major languages, because for poetry it's essential that it gets to the hearts and spirits of people, and it's very good to read it aloud, no matter how well or poor is our interpretation, it gets to people. And it's different from other genres. For example, in novels it's a business. In poetry it's something which is still, I would say, it has its life in itself. It has it has something old-fashioned in it, and it will always remain so, and it's for small numbers, and these small numbers matter in poetry, and poems always find their way. And for example, translating novels and getting them published in some major markets is perhaps good for your living, but on the other hand, for your heart, poetry is the way to survive most difficult times. And I come back to my metaphor of gardening. It's a small garden, but it's products with other poets.
And how is the situation, Elena, in Spain? You're also the editor of publishing house La Bella Varsovia, so maybe you know also about these grants much more in this situation?
As an author, I think that the fact that Spanish is a big language, and that means that perhaps translation is not a priority for the institutions. I know that there are some translation grants, but it's very difficult to access them. There are grants for attending festivals, but there aren't any residencies or writing grants. You get support after you write a book, not before you write a book. As a publisher, I have some grants for publishing books, mainly written in Spanish. I have published some poets from Germany, Italy, and Romania, and I haven't any grants for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how is the situation with you, Miroslav and Yasin? Can like the country that you're coming from also can be a plus with invitation to festivals? As like for some reason, like for example, small language that is more exotic, or like the geography position at the moment, geopolitical position, can also this affect actually translations? Maybe even in your case, if you have some experiences.
Yes, I have some experience, not me, but my country has a big experience. This year, Ukraine launched the first state program for supporting of the translation of Ukrainian literature into foreign languages. It's the first year, yes. And this autumn and winter, we are expecting for more than 50 new books, yes, that will be published in different countries, in different languages, from Israel to Germany and other countries, Czech Republic, France, and other countries. And our government gives €4,000 for each grant. And these books is 50, more than 50. I don't remember this number, maybe 60 books. It's, for example, it's a lot of poetry, right? Yes? No, I know that it's a great problem to translate poetry in other countries because it's not books for money, yes? And our government will support and will help to, for example, translate poetry. And not just classic poetry, but a lot of modern poetry. In this list of 50 books, this list was published maybe 1 month ago, yes? And in this list, you can find a lot of poetry books, yes? And not just poetry, a lot of classical books, a lot of modern novels, some non-fiction, some books for children. And you can check this possibility at the website of the Ukrainian Book Institute, or if you need it, I will help you.
Super. And what about Bulgarian situation, Yasin?
I think it's very similar to what was described about Croatia. It does exist. Financial support does exist, but it's not enough. It's very bureaucratic. And there is no strategy behind it, or like long-term vision and policy behind it. And because of that, I think most of the things that still exist and that happen and leave an impact are a matter of personal efforts and of people who have their personal motivation to do it. And for example, there is a foundation called Elizabeth Kostova Foundation. It's based in the US, and it's focused on translating Bulgarian literature in English because the founder of the foundation, Elizabeth Kostova, who is a best-selling author, has some origin and connection to Bulgaria. So it's some sort of personal mission that she's doing it. And this have helped a lot new Bulgarian novels to be translated, both in the US and in the UK, I think. And I remember I was very shocked to find out, for example, the Austrian program Traduki, that it funds translations between the small languages in Eastern Europe, so that the Austrian government is funding Croatian to Bulgarian, for example, and basically stepping in where our governments are failing to provide support.
So you see, we are doing a bit of networking. Maybe you heard about some program that you didn't know from your domestic countries, and you can apply, because some of you are, of course, also translators and editors and so on. But I was asking this because, of course, the residency program or the nomad program is, of course, connected with translation. You get translated even from big languages or smaller languages than into Slovenian when you come to Vilenica. And this is one of the main aim of Vilenica, connecting different literatures and basically gathering together poets from all around the world. As I mentioned from the beginning, some of you are part of the emerging writers on tour. Let's say the young generation, but we are all young. The other ones are authors nomads. And Jason, once again, congratulations, you're this year winner of the Central European Initiative Prize. What I'm now interested is in any one from you actually applied some project or like had some idea what he or she will do in Vilenica. I, for example, remember your project, Patriarchy, Elena, and I also read about your performance, Jason. So for the audience who will watch this on the festival, I would like to ask you if you could describe a bit more about your personal projects and what you wanted to do on this residency or nomad program. And maybe if we start with you, Yasin, because you're the winner of this initiative and you also have connected project to it. What you were expecting from Vilenica and from this residency?
Yes, what I wanted to say is that the good side of the lockdown was that I was able to go back to some writing projects that I didn't have time to work on because of all this crazy pace and non-stop traveling. And what I didn't say is that I work more in contemporary dance and performance field. So I started by publishing 2 poetry collections 10 years ago, but then I slowly moved on to work for the stage. But still this work with other people and with living bodies is very much informed by writing and is very much connected to poetry, I think. And I also studied dramaturgy, so I work as a dramaturg for other people as well. And my experience with literary festivals is really limited. I've been in 2013 in Costello di Duino, the poetry festival for young poets in Trieste in Italy, and that's it. That's all of it. And I've been more to contemporary dance and performance festivals around the world. Yes, these months of solitude and of cancelled and postponed events made me go back to reconsider a lot of manuscripts that I've been working on and that I didn't have time to really carefully examine. And that's how I got to apply for the award. And I was actually very surprised that I got it, because I know it's only one person and it's one spot. And I feel a lot of responsibility now that, okay, I have to really work seriously on this project. And to tell you a little bit more about the project, it started at a workshop in 2016 with Mark Ravenhill in Venice at the Biennale Teatro. And we were working with the Diary of Casanova. And I wrote 2 poems and a long monologue as part of these workshops that I then presented at a festival organized by the Academy in Sofia here, by the students in dramaturgy. And I worked with a Bulgarian actress on these 3 pieces, and I got very interested to continue work on this topic. And I was very interested in how these ideas of male and female and of seducer and seduced are shifting and changing nowadays. So I'm always trying to use some source material in order to address some contemporary issues, and that's what I've been doing in my previous writings. So I want to work on a piece that will be for performance, and I don't want to say it's going to be a play because it's not a classical dramatic play, and it will be very much informed by poetry, and it will basically continue this work that I didn't have the chance to examine. Yeah.
Maybe we continue with Mary.
You're asking what am I working on at the moment or what I've just finished?
Well, mostly I was interested what you wanted to present at Vilenica, but of course you're completely open. We are completely open to hear what you're working now.
Yes, I write fiction, so my novel that I presented at the festival is it's called The River Capture, and its main character is a 34-year-old man, a teacher who moves from the city back to the countryside where he grew up, and it's about his search for consciousness. Really, he's an obsessive James Joyce fan and a big reader, and it's about the life of the mind for a young man. It deals with issues around sexuality and family and loyalty and love. I'm a big fan, a big lover of Joyce as well. So I presented a little piece, a piece that pays homage to Joyce.
What about you, Sibila? Also coming from this program, Literature Nomads.
Yeah, right now I'm working on a new novel. It's called In the Name of. So it connects. Of course, you can do a lot of things in the name of something. This is not just good things that you do. So it's about the dark side of religion, and it connects several periods of time in Croatia and in Bolivia. So it's about immigrants, it's about the darkest hours in Croatia during the fascist times, but it's also about women, and it's about, it's a book that connects very difficult topics, difficult about, because it's a taboo. With these topics, I have already published a taboo trilogy. Do you hear me? Yeah, because there was okay. So now I'm working on this new novel, and it's not good actually to go into details, but I'm not very sure that it's a book that would be easily accepted if and when I finish it. But I enjoy writing, and what I do from other projects is this poetry is not finished. This collection of poetry that I have presented here in Vilenica, it's going to be also a part of a project that is connected to music and an exhibition with live plants in it, and the photographs. And the third project that I'm working on is my old libretto, which I'm trying to adapt for, which I have already adapted for a musical, but you never know with this because it's something which is rather new and new for me, and I don't know in which direction it could develop, but I still like it very much.
You're in any situation really known for uncovering this taboo thematic and researching sexuality, feminism. This in a way connects us together with Elena, who is also concentrating a lot on feminism, both in her writing and with the publishing house, where she gave space to female authors. So what was your project? And especially because of the title, it's a logical continuation that I ask you.
In the residence, I wanted to work in my new book of poems about the idea of the language of woman, about which Hélène Cixous has written so much, and I wanted to work with intertextuality, with the way in which this language of women is constructed by women themselves with their books, not on the books of men as canonical reference. One of the parts of that book of poems will be not the translation, but the rewriting of patriarchal poetry by Gertrude Stein. However, in those first months of writing, especially in the residency in Croatia, I thought about how hypocritical it's for me to have Gertrude Stein as a reference. What does she have in common with me? What I have in common with her? We don't share time, language, geography, social class. I thought about the closest writing experiences in my family. There are no writers in my family. There are no readers. But my great grandmother, she was a poor woman, but she managed to learn to read and write when no woman in her class could read and write in the early decades of the 20th century. She was valued in her community as a respectable woman. She taught her daughters to read and write. So now I am writing about how my great-grandmother, and not Gertrude Stein, has helped me to build my own language as a woman. One of the things that I love when I write is how the books are making themselves, almost without me. The journey from the idea to the book.
And what about you, Miroslav?
At the Vilenica festival, I read a couple of poems from my latest poetry book, The Rose. The title is The Rose. But on the Emerging Writer on Tour project, my project is a novel. And it's not my first novel, but this novel is dedicated to the issue of co-living of three folks: Ukrainians, Jews, and Polish people before the Second World War, and in my native town in Western Ukraine. I remember the stories of my grandfather Nicola about those times, and I also know that contemporary people in Ukraine, in my small town, don't know anything about those times, as if the communism and socialism is the only past. Yes, nothing before that. And those relation of the different folks, languages, religions, and types of governance. These types were not ideal, but that was a lesson we failed to learn. And the characters of my novel try to save their individuality in the conditions when everything is oppressed with big systems and so-called big history. It is very important to me to stay against this theme when there are a lot of ideas trying to steal your life. And my novel is about these people and about this ideal that are not just a history, but it's about now.
Yeah, residencies are always, in a way, also allowing you to work on new projects. They may mean, in a way, some freedom, both financially, because a lot of residencies are connected with the stipendiums or allowance, and also, in a way, a bit of an escape, if we put it like this, from the local environment. My next question is, some of you already attended quite some residency program. And I was, of course, a bit stalking you all on social media and in interviews. And I read a really awesome sentence that Sibila said: "Freedom of creativity comes at a price. What matters is the space of freedom, the space of action." Of course, it's put out of the context. It was for something else, but I'm wondering, you're in a way dislocated from your local environment in residency, and geographical coordinates often are also the ones that make our own identity. Some of you also use the space and locations very often in your work. For example, in your case, Mary, we can see a lot of Irish scenery or Carpathian mountains in Miroslav case. I'm wondering, is the residency program offering you this necessarily act of freedom, that you in a way escape a bit and you can be free for creativity? Maybe if we start with Sibila, you?
Okay. Who is starting now?
Maybe Sibila, if you want, you can start, Sibila, okay. Because we used your quote.
Okay, I haven't been for a residency program for quite a while, you know, because I have traveled a lot when I was young, as my colleagues sitting beside me virtually right now. But it was very good for my writing. I really adored it. For example, when I got the residency in Brussels, and I finished one novel there. The second part of the Taboo trilogy I finished in Brussels, and I really need it. I would love to be able to travel again, and I sincerely hope that this COVID situation will come to the end, and so that I can get another chance to have some free time for writing, because it's not so easy to be a university teacher at the Academy of Drama Art. It's very good at one point because I have very talented students, but on the other hand, I have to sacrifice some of my writing in order to help other writers and other creative personalities to come to prominence, which I like, of course. But on the other hand, I need my privacy for writing. I need my time for writing. And I have decided in these difficult times, I have decided to make priorities in order to finish some of the projects that I have started, and somehow I didn't have enough energy and time to finish it. And coming back to the quote that freedom has to be paid, yes, it was in the situation when I was attacked and as an activist in my country, and when I really realized that freedom is something that you have to be outspoken, and then if you have consequences of being outspoken, then you just have to accept it. But then you are free. Then you know that you don't depend on anybody, or you try not to depend on major players in this world, and you somehow survive. I learned it from my father, who was a painter, and in the time of Tito's regime, he was just living on his painting. And of course, it's important that you don't show fear, and that you always try to be yourself. And now I think that we live in times when it's not so easy to see who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. So what we have to pay now is I would say, living in the situation of global market. It's not the globalism that we have been used to. It's now corporatism, and how to have your freedom in the corporate world as a writer and as a free person. It's a big question. I don't know how to cope with it, but I'm trying.
Yeah, because a lot of authors are saying that residencies are allowing them time and necessary funds as well, that they can just write in peace, that they are also like in some way not distracted by the literary scene of their homeland and so on. So what are the experience of others on this? Like maybe Elena?
My experience with residencies is really short, but I can maybe talk about crisis and awards. I was born into a working class family and have always had to work to support myself. If I want to set aside 2 months to finish a book, for example, I have to save out money so that I don't have to work in those 2 months. If prices are indoor, they allow me to pay the rent, gain some time to write. Apart from the fact that someone is interested in what you write, that someone values your work, the value for me is economical mainly. Mm-hmm.
What is your experience, Mary, on this? I read in one interview that they were asking you about living abroad, if you would choose to live abroad or like work abroad. What is your understanding of like residency programs? And I'm interested in your experience about that.
Well, can you hear me okay? I think my line broke for a moment. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes, we can. We can.
I haven't done many residencies abroad. I did one. I had a 3-month residency in Paris a few years ago, and it was beautiful, beautiful place and everything, and very inspiring in many ways. And I did work to some extent, but I was very lonely. I don't like to travel a lot. It's, you know, I am a home bird. I like to be secure. The best place I can work is at home in my own house where I feel safe and quiet. So I don't seek out residencies that much. I know it's very important to travel, but as I've got older, I find travel lonely and stressful and very disruptive. So if I'm working on a book, I actually have to stay very quietly in one place with not too much distraction. I used to be a full-time teacher, and after my first book came out, I gave up work and I write full-time now. And our government gives supports to literary writers. Every now and again you get a bursary, a grant. If you apply for it, you have to submit your work, your project. So I have been very lucky. I've got a few of those. So I have a quiet house. I don't have children. My partner and I are both writers. So I understand the value of residencies, especially for meeting other writers and especially when one is younger. But as I get older, I find it's too much and I pine for home. I just spend all my time thinking I should be at home in my own quiet room.
I think that it all comes to this, that we just need a quiet room to write. So I'm also wondering in like, again, young generation, what is the experience with you, Yasin and Miroslav? Also maybe with like all the residencies are also allowing authors who are there to work with local artists. Did you on your residency work with some collaborations of the country that you were living in or working there?
Yes, I really don't like very much this idealized version of residencies are given you freedom and money, because I also see that right now there are so many residencies, more so than not, who are some sort of business models where you have to pay to work. This also exists. Of course, it's good to have support, but I love to say, especially so in the contemporary art and in the performing arts world, that it's to me is no longer a choice of who can afford to travel, but who can afford not to travel, because you are supposed to be, gaining these awards and to have this CV, and in order to actually produce work outside of the pressure of the market, where you have, I don't know, for a performance, you have a month and a half or maybe 2 months in the best case, and you have money and you're supposed to just, pump up a production very fast, then you don't have any space and time for research or for some risk taking. And residencies do provide that, but I agree, it comes at a cost, and it comes with a certain sacrifice, certain things that you have to give up, and also probably connected to a certain privilege as well, as like who can afford to hop from a residency to residency, and like you have to have a certain stability to be able to choose that type of life. And of course, like personally to me, it has changed my life a lot, because through a residency, my first residency was in Shanghai for 6 months, and I was 24 years old back then, and then I stayed, I did my master's there, and it really changed everything for me. This city in a way also, and the university in the way it was also somehow practicing decolonization, not in theory, because I was the only European, so I really got a totally different view of the world. And then later on, with the latest residencies I've been doing, which were mostly with performing arts, I started collaborating and working a lot with local people. So I usually make an open call, I invite people to come in, and I make a workshop which mixes both writing and physical practices. And to me, this is very interesting, to get to know a place through the people. Yes. So I have mixed feelings about residencies, but I also feel they are inevitable for me at that point, at that time of my career.
Yeah, this is actually a really interesting point that I also wanted to talk a bit, because residencies program can be quite limited as well, as we just, maybe if we are thinking about the young authors, a lot of new residencies are having these limitations about like mystification of youthness. They're open just till the 35 years old authors. Some, of course, are not accepting families or children, which is a huge problem, especially for female authors in some cases. So Miroslav or anyone else, do you also have some difficulties? Did you have some difficulties in this kind of programs? And what do you consider it could be done in a better way with residencies? Also, if we maybe refer to Vilenica, how can we improve?
Yeah, no, as for me, I can write without any residences. I can write even in metro, in underground, sitting with another people. That's why I was not into the idea of residences. That's why the Emergent also on tour project is my first residency project. And the first city was Zagreb. It was 1 year ago in this time, yes, the end of summer, the beginning of autumn. And I knew nobody from Zagreb, and I had no possibility to spend days and nights just walking, just drinking and singing and dancing. And when you are alone, you discover the city firstly, yes? Then you find the places that are yours, yes? in Zagreb, the cafe in front of the market was such a place for me, yes. And this cafe is open till noon as a market, and the locals gathered there, mainly the elders, yeah, the eldest people, and they drank something strong, and this place became my office, yes. Writing is always freedom, yes, and it's the main joy of writing for me. And this place gave me this feeling of lightness, of being, which I felt from the visitors, yes. That's why my first experience was really good, and I don't know what to say else. Yes, I think that the best variant to give the author more freedom, more freedom, yes, it's the main idea.
Do somebody else has something to add to maybe these residential programs, about some difficulties that they encountered? If not, it is of course really interesting because your experiences are so different in these programs, and at the same time we come to this point that it's good that we have this ability that we can basically write anywhere except just that we have some space for ourselves. And this also brings me to your personal writings, because of course I would also like to introduce you as authors among each other, as a networking, and also the audience of Vilenica. And some of you started writing extremely early for some cases. Like Elena, I think that you published while you were 16, right? I'm not sure though. Again, in your case, Mary, you resisted the urge to write for years, as I read in one interview. So I would like to ask you for the beginning a bit more generic question, but I'm actually really interested how you started writing and what the writing as act and just the writing itself means to you.
I learned to read when I was 4 or 5 years old. And I also started very early to tell stories aloud, to write them down when I could. Reading and writing are, for me, first of all, acts of pleasure. We read and write because we like it, because we enjoy it. Then later comes reflection, of course. For me, writing has to do with political positioning, I think, with the possibility of generating a discourse and setting up a conversation about, in my case, genre and social class. But in the origin of my books, is always maybe joy. Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering now, Mary, how come that you were against this urge to write for so much time?
Well, I had studied English in college. When I was young, writing was not on my radar. I read lots, but I had no ambition to be a writer. But when I was around 22 or 23, I had become a teacher, and something was eating at me. Something was gnawing. You know, I went through a period of insomnia, and something was wrong. It didn't appear to be wrong in my life, and I realized I wanted to write. So I started writing, and I sent some stories out, and they were published, and I was shortlisted for some awards. And I had gotten married then. I was 23, and I was teaching full time, and writing slipped into the margins of my life. It kind of went underground. I couldn't accommodate both. So, but I continued to write, and I continued to read a lot, and I didn't send work out, and I sort of felt writing was almost an intrusion in my life. I felt it as a burden. I didn't know any writers. I wasn't part of any writing community. I was a big reader, but I was trying to do something. I had studied Jungian psychotherapy for a few years and philosophy, and I was trying to put my finger on something. And I think that was the effort of expression. So I wrote lots of stories, but I was in my 40s before I sent them out again. So I was well into my 40s when my first book came out, and then that was a book of stories. And so I did resist it because I felt it was an interruption in my life. I felt it almost as a burden. I wanted to be normal. I didn't want this thing eating at me. I wanted to be like my friends and my sisters, but eventually it wouldn't go away.
And on the other hand, Sibila, you were already born in a really artistic family. So was the literature basically already happening from the start of your birth?
Yeah, I was born in the family of two painters, and I started writing poetry before I was able to write. It sounds funny, but I was just telling something and my mom was jotting it down. I was very lucky that she was an artistic person, otherwise I would be put into a sanatorium or some other institution for crazy people, because it was not usual for a child to talk poetry, and she recognized that it's poetry and not nonsense. And my first shock was when I was about 11 years old, or maybe, yeah, 11 years old, when I applied to an anonymous competition in Croatia, and then I won it. I won it, and when they saw that I was a child, they were really, really shocked, because they were just prejudiced against young people, and they said, you can wait. And they didn't publish my collection of poetry. I already had a collection of poetry. Without getting my poetry published, and it was a big shock for me. You know, it was the first disappointment. It was unjust. They said you should wait, because when they saw me so young, they just didn't know how to deal with it. So the person who was rather aged, and he got the second prize. He got his work published. And I said to myself, okay, I'll wait. So it took me years and years before I published my work. I never published this collection, this actual collection of poetry, my first one, not until this day. And I became a theoretician and a literary critic. I read a lot before venturing into publishing again. I was still rather young when I published my first book, but I was not, but I came into the literary world with this heavy feeling of a big prejudice against everything. Either you are too young or you are too old. So in between, you just have to write and hope for the best.
And Miroslav, you started writing also really young, right?
Yeah, but my first book was published when I was 18. But it's not my first book. It's my zero book. You understand why, and you can imagine the level of my poetry in 18. Yeah, yeah. I began writing in my early years. I wrote my first poem even before my school days. It was about hedgehog. I don't remember the poem, but I know the title. Yes. But I think that literature, art in my life began even earlier when the objects of the world, yes, they are transforming into some images. You don't know how to write, but you understand that it's not the same, yes. It's a work of imagination. It's a work of creation of new work, yes. Yeah, writing has different expressions. For in my life, poetry just born. Yes, I never take a pen or a laptop. Yes, to write poetry. and write it accidentally when I need to catch a thought. Yes, just right. But prose gives me a possibility to tell interesting stories on which I worked for a long time. It's a real work. It's not poetry. Yes. Prose lets me speak on complicated social and philosophical issues due to which you can't sleep. Yes.
Yeah, when I was reading your work, some of course translations and about your life, I also noticed that quite some of you, in terms of genres, some of you started in poetry, continued in prose. Again, some are connecting literature with various artistical genres, like for example, in your case, Yasin. So I would like to ask you, in which genre are you most at home, and also what this genre is allowing you for the personal writing? Does your writing also difference between different genres?
I will start from the previous question and move on, because I started with telling stories, and I was very interested in plots and building plots. And nowadays, I'm totally against it. No longer interested in plots. And then there was this moment when I lost a friend by suicide, so just before I finished high school. And it was a moment of, I think, maybe unconsciously choosing writing as a form of like therapy, or trying to also understand this, where does this darkness come from, and why did that happen. And later on, I moved from, I felt that writing plots and writing prose was somehow, I was using dead language. So that's when I got to poetry quite late. As an experiment to see what language can do. And then I won a poetry competition, and I had to compile a book. So it's not that I wanted to publish anything, but I had to do it as part of the competition, and I published this poetry collection. And then I also, this was also like a very conscious decision, that I was going through this moment of like some sort of depression maybe, and I felt that I have to perform these poems, that I have to kind of defend my words with my own body, and I have to go on stage and be able to speak out loud. And this really terrified me back then. So it was a sort of challenge to myself to be able to give flesh to the words. And that's how also I slowly got into working with actors or working with other people on stage and dramaturgy. And for a long time, I felt also as a way that I'm a prisoner of language, that what I'm writing cannot really be translated, and the translation is always a failure, or in the best case, it's a totally new work that the translator is doing in the other language. And that's how I also got very interested in how the meaning or the core and the essence of a poem can be translated through the body. And that's when I got into this performance practice, where I worked with, when I was living in Shanghai, with a very interesting artist from Ghana. And we worked with a lot of literature. We worked with poetry, also with theoretical texts, with philosophy, and we basically had 3 months of research where we were transforming these writings into physical practice. And I'm still working on this research, so it's a long-term thing. It's not just one production or performance. And at the end of the day, I think these different practices all inform each other. And for me, it's yeah, I think maybe the core of what I'm doing is this connection between writing and the body, and it always revolves around that. But it's very much intuition, and it's yeah, it just merges naturally one into the other.
Does somebody else wants to add something where he or she is most home, as in genre? If not, there is also, like we were now talking about, of course, personal creations, how you're creating literature, but there is also another side of that, and of course, receivers, so the readers, and the state of literature in contemporary world. Sibila, for example, already mentioned in the when we had the conversation earlier, from the beginning, the economical position of the creator, of the writer, of the poet. Many of you are working or were working in different professions. Miroslav, you were, for example, TV presenter. Mary, you, as you said, you were teaching. Sibila, you're doing many jobs, from theoretic to the professor. Elena, we already mentioned you being also the editor of publishing house. And Yasin, we were now talking about you being also performative artist. I'm curious, like especially nowadays when we also, because of COVID situation, and it differs from country to country, but literature and the cultural sector will suffer great damage as a result of this pandemic. And if we take in the account that in some places, literature is also losing public interest, losing the readers, what is, by your opinion, the future of literature? And if I give some of the examples, what we can talk about now, is the solution in basically in PR, of like using social networks, going more to mainstream to get on the visibility. My major question for you as authors, as writers, poets, is how to develop an art practice, a writing practice in these times of uncertainty, and how to also break out the social and emotional apathy that sometimes is connected from general public to the field of literature. Who would like to start?
I can start if you, yes.
Of course, of course.
Yes, it's my new book. It's my brand new book, published several days ago, and if you can guess, it's not. It's for children. Yeah. Despite the pandemic and enormous economic loss, I cannot say that the culture stopped. For example, in Ukraine, art was never commercial now in Ukraine. Yes. That's why my friends, a popular music band, for example, Daughters, have just recorded a new album. In couple days, I'm going to the first run of a new theater play, yes, theater performance, and my friends work on movies now, today, yes. And this is a drawback as well as a benefit of the Ukrainian culture, yes? When the art is not commercial and it doesn't need a lot of money, yes? But this situation proves that we need culture as a blessing, yes? It is self-sufficient. I don't see the problem in the way as we communicate culture. We try to find another ways. By people still watch movies, read books. For me, the main thing is to support the existence of culture.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that the death of literature has centuries in the past, you know, the books will disappear and there will be no readers. And when TVs and movies came on stream, everybody thought that too. I think that books and literature won't die. I think there'll be, and I think even the book sales have increased somewhat, you know, pandemic, you know, since bookshops opened and online sales have improved. But the important thing is to support artists and writers, and especially the performing arts, throughout this particular time during the pandemic. One of the things that strikes me is there's a lot of resources online. You know, there's a lot of festivals, there's a lot of performing online, and people are not being charged for it. You know, some literary festivals, people can go on and view them for free. So I think if there is a shift away from live performances, then audiences maybe should pay for the viewings online, you know, and that would, because artists and performers are going to need to be paid. They're going to need some support. I don't think the book is dead. I don't think literature, it will never die. People will always need to have a private experience between them and the characters in a book.
Can I add something to it? Yeah, I utterly agree with you. That's it. I mean, the main reason for writing is that we deeply in ourselves, we know that we are doing something which is important for other people as well, not only for us. At the moment it's difficult. I have two different stories to tell in relation to this. One is more practical, and I completely agree with you that we are professionals. We have to it's a passion, but it's also a job. And the difficulty for performing artists now is if they go online and nobody pays for it, it's actually as if we think that it does not exist as a professional performing art. And people depend on it. They have organized their lives upon it. I'm lucky enough for the moment, because I lived as a freelancer for years and years. I'm lucky that I have a stable job at the university, but otherwise I would be very much in distress. And there is another story connected to this topic, and it's more like a parable. And I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell it to you, although it's quite shocking. It's been about 10 years ago. I was on the committee of some festival for new plays. And the organizer couldn't pay, and so he said, you can get paid in spa at the luxurious hotel. And I said, okay, because I've never been to the there was a guy who was supposed to do the massage to me, and I said I would prefer to have a woman to do massage to me. And he said, no, I definitely have to do massage on you. And I said, why? And the guy said, I don't know nothing about you, but I was giving massage to people who die for years. I was working in the hospital for oncologic patients, and I feel energies of people. And I feel how to connect energetically with other people. And I have a message to tell you. And he said the following: the darkness of the night is deepest towards the dawn, which means that actually it's very, and it's going to be harder to survive in the world as it is today. But small numbers matter, dear lady, he said. We are all together and we can recognize the energies of other spiritual beings, and perhaps we can change it somehow through meditation to other people. And I was shocked with it, because he was half-educated guy. He was not an intellectual. He never read anything from my books. but he had a message, a very nice message to tell. And this message is particularly important in the COVID years. I said years because it's already almost a year, and it's going to be perhaps for another year or maybe longer. But somehow we don't have to say it's the new normal. We will always have this potential to share energies. And I know that people need other people. It's okay. But for a concert, people are just like seals on the beach. They have to share body experience together and to listen to music. They have to take the energy from the artist and then give it back to us. And if we are not in the position to share our energy, then actually we are lost. So I think that the problem has two faces. One is how to survive in the world where we are supposed to give our work for free because somebody thinks that it's not important at all. Ultimately, they are not going to subsidize it at all. And the other face of this problem is this, which is giving me some, I would say some hope, because small numbers matter, as the guy said. I think from small numbers and from the energy through live reading, we can reach our audience. We just have to forget about adapting ourselves to the stupidity that has created the so-called audience for us. Because people read, they are going to read. You cannot re-educate canon meat that has been created for the Third World War today. But perhaps the next generation and the generation after that would need art. We just have to do our little gardening and enjoy small numbers.
And how is the situation is in Spain? I'm especially curious, Elena, with this situation, because as already mentioned several times, you're also a publisher, and some projections are showing now that around 50 to 60% less book will be published just because of COVID. And it's like a lost year in some ways.
Yeah, we have to, in my publishing house, we have to stop the publishing between March and June. The books that I have had published in spring, I am going to publish them in autumn, for example. But during this lockdown, these 3 months of lockdown, people shared their favorite readings. Some publishing houses share for free books. People understand that books are maybe a safe place. It was really, I don't know how to say it, was really beautiful for me. For example, when the bookshops reopened, the people bought there like in a kind of militance. Especially books published by independent publishing house, books of poetry, literary genres with less readers than novels and essays. I think it's a difficult time, I think, for publishing in Spain, for writing in Spain, for having a bookshop in Spain, but I don't know what is the future of literature. We have been telling stories and we have been telling poems since the beginning of time. I don't know what if it has survived the book and literature. It has survived wars and pandemics, tablets, books, whatever the format. I'm not afraid of the future of literature in Spain or in other countries.
this is an interesting aspect, of course, because it is true in a way. The situation nowadays, especially when we experience pandemic, you already mentioned it several times, some of you, that also this lockdown in a way reminded people, or basically after some time they started appreciating art and literature again, because they were among four walls and they needed literature and art to basically find some hope, to survive, to be stable, to be mentally stable. So what is your perspective in the future, for the future of literature and creation, Miroslav and Yasin?
I'm muted. I have do you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do.
I have a more radical position on it, and I think culture and education and healthcare should not be out on the market. And I think it is really detrimental to artists to be judged on a number of likes on Facebook or a number of sales, book sales or ticket sales. And I think this should be a priority of the so-called ministries of culture, to create policies and strategies in order to be able to provide the right conditions for literature and for all the arts to flourish, and to give the freedom to artists to express what they need to express and not what is expected from them to express. And this total, how to say, acceptance of this neoliberal language of calling a work of art a product is really, really problematic to me. And all of the institutions have now adopted this language and are also basing their policies on that type of measures, which are the measures of success, which are totally outside of what literature or art is about. And in that sense, I think this will not be solved by charging people on the internet or by raising the price of the tickets, because I think this is just exporting the responsibility to the so-called consumers. But I think we need more subsidies, and I think we should all be fighting for it, because there have been in the last years radical budget cuts all over Europe, which are really threatening the work of artists. And to me, this is it scares me, because I feel more and more this coming corporate world that will be able to make us how to say, that will limit our freedoms unless we fight for them. Yeah.
Miroslav, do you have anything to add from your experience about that, or like your vision?
Okay. No, for me, this question is very similar to the question about genres. Yes. No, for me, yes. Yes, I wrote several novels. Now I'm working in cinema, for example, and write books for children. Yes, poetry for me is the most sophisticated genre. It is the most impressive, and it is the most precise. Yes, but future of genres and future of creativity for me, no, it's not important to say about genres and to say about some transformation. For me, the main intention is this intention of a child to transform a world. In what way we will transform? In what shape? In what frame? It doesn't matter. The main reason, the main idea is to transform, yes, to create another world. That's why, for me, it's not some crisis. Yes, I know that it's too hard to sell books. Yes, it's hard it's hard to give this writing world to people who like Instagram and TikTok. Yes, it's too hard. And But I think that creativity will create for us another ways. Yes.
These were really interesting aspects, because Vilenica, as you know, each year, of course, addresses the issues and open questions, both regarding to literature and, of course, society as well. The same is this year, when the motto of Vilenica 2020 is Europe is shrinking and spreading, Quo Vadis. Vilenica, as you all know, began in a difficult time in a divided Europe, which was again later affected by war. Some of you also have the experience of war, a going on and one from the past. And now again we are seeing the divided Europe. I would ask you now two questions, because we are always asking all the authors of this year, Vilenica, their opinion and then their thoughts about this motto. As thinkers, as writers, as a critical mind. First question is connected with your own writing, and deals, because all of you deal with socially relevant topics, as we already mentioned, revealing taboos, dark sides of democracy, religion, sexuality, feminism, disability. Is writing for you also a political commentary? A response? And the second question, tied to the vote, how do you assume the future of Europe will look?
I might start, if that's all right.
Of course, please.
I certainly don't intend to set out to write anything that's political, you know, overtly political. However, dramatization of people's lives in personal lives. I write about the inner life mostly, but of course there are always political choices and ethical dilemmas in characters' lives, and politics in a private way, and the personal life always impinges political, and the public life always impinges upon the person. So there are always those dilemmas, and the conflicts which people have to endure in their personal lives often reach into the political. So writers, even though they might not intend to write politically, end up by default writing politically. So that's the first part. And the second part is the future of Europe. It is and has been threatened many times. You know, I suppose I particularly think about the European Union, you know, formed after the Second World War. You know, nations, centuries, peoples of Europe slaughtered each other, and the European Union out of that formed to make sure that that was not to happen again, to make sure that there was dialogue, that nations spoke to each other, that nations respected each other's difference, and that nations talked together for the common good. One of our beloved politicians from Northern Ireland, who was an architect of the peace process and won the Nobel Prize, John Hume, died last week. And he made a very moving speech to the European Parliament after he'd received the Nobel Prize. And he said that the European Union is the most successful organization in the world in conflict resolution. Because of that very thing, it got the nations of Europe who had been at war to now agree that this was never to happen again. So while there is dialogue and while people come around a table, and there will be differences and there will be threats to the European Union, but it gives me hope that it will go on into the future, and it must. There's no choice that it can't, it must. It has grown bigger, and of course there are issues. However, the strong must help the weak. And I was very pleased there a few weeks ago when the financial package that was agreed in Europe went through, not as much as we'd hoped, but it went through, so that the poorer states were helped after the pandemic. The strong must always help the weak. That's the only rule, and diversity and difference must be respected. So I am very hopeful for Europe going forward.
What about you, Sibila? You are writing a lot about these dark sides of democracy.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not all that optimistic about the bureaucratic part of European Union. Of course, I agree that it's important to have the sense of security, and that European Union has just provided us with this sense for a while. But now we are living in the world which is the repetition of the situation that was actually before every world war until now. So at least Europe now, at this very moment, is between this political game of world powers which are connected to Europe, but connected in a way that they have their financial means to go. Trying to survive in the midst of the general crisis, which is like a Cold War between the East and the West, which I sincerely hope that it's never going to be repeated again. And now we are in the midst of the crisis, which is repeating the same mistake that have been done before. Not only concerning the Cold War situation, and for example, you can see it even in the way vaccines are being produced at this very moment, because it's politically influenced. Even medicine, science, things that for me have been the most sacred ivory towers of truth are falling down now in a very bureaucratic way, in a way that is making people accept the truths, which are only half truths. And we have to adapt ourselves to the new situations where we cannot just hope that Europe will give us the sense of security. We must fight for this sense of security. In media, we must find our voice. It's becoming more difficult now to say what we think, because even in Facebook, for example, if you put a picture that somebody misinterprets, it disappears. If you put a message that somebody there from the bureaucratic circles misinterprets, it just disappears. Even in science, there are some works that have been suppressed in order not to introduce the difficulty of not popular truth. So I think the most difficult problem for me now is the new ethics and aesthetics all together. Because politics always thinks about us even when we don't think about politics. Politics is in corporatism. Politics is now not black and white. It exists between the lines. It exists even in the ivory tower of science. And it's deplorable to see how people cannot really see the symptoms that have led to the First World War and the Second World War. Populism is all around us. This European Union is a European Union of populist politics that if they are matched with economical crisis, are going to lead to new fascism. So I sincerely hope for European Union to survive, but it cannot survive in the political circumstances of the Cold War around it if we do not help it. We have to come out of our dreams and find new ways of activism in the public sphere. The public sphere is not articulated as it should be. We should teach people how to express their views, and not only violently, because somebody is using even violence and violent expressing of the views of the people in order to make us silent when we have to express what we feel and what we have to tell about the world we live in. I'm sorry that I'm not pessimistic. I'm just realistic. I think that there is a future to European Union, but we must merit it. We must work towards it and not let the future of European Union to bureaucrats of European Union. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Of course, we are, of course, seeing again what we already saw in the past, like populism rising, the divisions, the West and East, and that's why I'm really curious about your perspective, Miroslav, about still ongoing conflict in your home country. And how do you see the future from your point of view, and also your writing maybe as a political act? You also wrote an amazing poem about a Russian-Ukrainian incident.
Yeah, thank you. I want to begin with the motto of the festival: Europe is shrinking and spreading. Yes, and but most participants here are from the European Union and from Schengen. Yes, but Europe was never brought for the Ukrainians. We always had the restrictions. Yes, imagine these queues and waiting for the visa in the visa centers when you just wish to see the Acropolis. Yes, you gather numerous documents, data, and need to wait for months, and frequently you don't get a visa. Yes, of course, the unity in the culture. The unity in the culture field is much more important, yes, than actual physical borders. But the main changes usually appear at the borders, yes, and then they spread to the center, yes. And there is a war at the borders now, which is for us, it's a civilizational treat for Europe, yes? We want to stay and we want to survive, but this issue is raised by many Ukrainian authors, and I also develop it. It is not, you said that it's a conflict, yes, with Russia. For us, it's not just a conflict, it's a real war. Yes, people are killed. Every day, somebody is killed. Minds are poisoned. Millions of minds are poisoned now. And for us, it's a question of civilizational surviving. Europe needs to be consolidated. Yes, the former frames might probably not work this time. Yes, and Ukrainian Vilenica Prize winner Yuri Andukhovich said that Europe doesn't know its borders. Yes, but I propose that European borders lie in the places where people battle for the European values.
Yeah, it's of course like some of the people are not even aware that the war is on the doorsteps of Europe. What is your perspective, Elena and Yasin, coming from the so-called older European state, who is one of the countries that form Europe, joined much earlier in the past, and so-called the new states? How is your view of Europe? And also the same questions, how, because you both deal with a lot of this social engagement in your writing as well. How do you reflect that as well in your art?
I think everything is political and everything is politics. And all our decisions respond to a political position. Even those who boast of not getting involved are doing it. I write from feminism, about feminism because I am a feminist. I don't know how to write by stripping myself of my circumstances. Being a working class woman who was born in a small city in the south of Spain, in the poorest part of the poorest region of the country, now living in a working class neighborhood on the outskirts of a big city. Regarding to the European Union, I don't know what to answer. I think the password is solidarity. For me, it was very sad of all the discussion about the funds from the European Union for the countries who suffered the COVID crisis. It was really sad because I think this is not about receiving. I think it's about giving. What do you could give to the others to, I don't know how to say, to build a link between countries, between identities. We are not going to present like a united image, but I think we can create an European identity made up of fragments of many identities from one country, another country. I think my answer is going to be make over time.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from the poorest member state of the European Union, I'm right now, because I'm attending this Zoom session, I cannot go and attend a protest in front of the German embassy that is happening right now, and it's also at the 35th day of protests here in Bulgaria. These are protests against the so-called captured state or deep state, against oligarchy, against corruption, and against a failed justice system. And what I feel and see happening on the streets, because I'm attending every day, is that people who relatively see the European Union very positively, more than 60% of Bulgarians actually approve of the Union, are starting to become really disillusioned with the way the European Union is closing their eyes with these structural problems in the country. And they are starting to see that somehow all the talk about rights and democracy and values is less important than open markets and border closures, because we have also built a wall with the border with Turkey to stop the refugees coming to Europe. And in that sense, I think it's the first time that Europe is kind of shrinking. It's closing down after centuries of expanding and of through the colonial ventures, and then through the expansion of democracy, and then through building this the best welfare systems in the world, where they sort of believed with this idea of the end of history that this will be the model that will be emulated by the rest of the planet, by all the countries. End of something. And but I am really pro-European Union, and I do hope that we will find a way collectively to get out of this terrible situation right now, which is also a situation of financial austerity, what some of the others mentioned, of how it's a situation of division, of how the rich northern countries are accusing the poor southern ones, and how the liberal West is accusing the so-called neo-fascist East. And it's this division is quite striking, and is really disturbing. And I'm also not very optimistic about the future in that sense. But the protests here, for example, have been, and these protests are, let's say, a continuation of, they don't come out of nowhere. There were big protests 7 years ago for the same reasons that completely failed to produce any political alternative, and now we are back to it, and it does give me hope that that this situation cannot go on. So we need to create alternatives, and also there are bigger questions that we will have to face in this century, and I think the pandemic is some sort of rehearsal for these bigger questions around climate change and around the changing economy, and how are we going to work, and how are we going to deal with the precarious situation of so many workers. So I think the best bet for Europe would be to go back to its root of like welfare state and of social solidarity and trying to build like an equal society. And I'm also very disillusioned and a little bit angry that I see from the frugal countries, the ones that are actually really progressive in their own, within their own borders, like Sweden, for example, or Finland, who have created equal societies, that they are imposing these financial austerities to the South. And this financial austerity is what is bringing fascism and is bringing the far right. So it's something that we have to talk about all the time, I think, and that we have to discuss and try to address, and also try to address it collectively, not to be against each other as nations, but to find allies in the countries that are basically imposing these policies against us. So yeah, this is my position.
Thank you so much. I really promise this is the last question and a half. Thank you so much for your patience. We're talking for a long time, but you're all really so interesting, and it's hard to just stop talking. We were now talking, of course, about identity, about borders, and Vilenica from the beginning, when it was established in 1986, was actually the festival who was promoting this cultural diversity, pluralism, and of course, giving a vote to the freedom of speech, freedom of literature. We were now also talking about different geographical positions in Europe and cultural backgrounds. I would like to ask you, Vilenica is a Central European festival. That's in its title. And we are all in a way coming from different geographical backgrounds, even though, as we were now talking, we are connected by this European experience and European problems that are facing each one of us. I remember when, Elena, you were writing an email to me that you were a bit afraid because of Central Europe, because you're coming from Spain. And maybe to conclude in some situation, like some of you are using this geographical space of Central Europe in your work. Like, for example, Sibila, you who are getting the material also, like in some books, from the Austro-Ugrian monarchy. There can be some parallels as well. Like, for example, it is said that Central Europe has this feeling of melancholy that is somehow present, I guess, also in Ireland. On other hand, there are, of course, differences, maybe in Iberian Peninsula, or even with your experience, Yasin, who were living in China. I would like to ask you, what is this spiritual space, which is like often talk about of Central Europe? What does it mean to you? When you hear the Central Europe, the term of it, what does it recalls? And what are maybe similarities or differences that you found also when we were now talking?
I suppose if I start again, for me, being so far from Central Europe, I guess, where I'm on the outer western edge of Europe, when I think of Central Europe, when I think of it from the terms of history and growing up going to school, I think of the Austro-Hungarian Empire for sure, and I think of Vienna. I think of the spiritual legacy of the intellectual life and the creative life and artist life, music, cafe society, psychoanalysis, Freud, you know. I think of that sort of a center. I know that there was a lot of other things that weren't always pleasant, but if we were to take the legacy of Central Europe and see it as the intellectual progression and innovation and advancement, you know, the inner life was given credence and given dignity by Freud and Jung, and looking inwards is as important. And certainly as a writer, that's where we look first. So I think when I think of Central Europe, I do think of the spiritual legacy of the creative life, first and foremost. I am not as drawn to, obviously, towards the politics, but the starting point for me has to be the inner, looking inwards. That's the image I have of Central Europe.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Sibila? Because it is present in your work.
Yeah, as you said, I've spent a lot of time investigating and doing my research in the subjects of Freud and Freud disciples, of Central European cultural circles, Jewish salons, and of course, this is something that is important for entire Europe. I mean, Central Europe is the heart of Europe in a way that it was a melting pot of ideas at the certain point of time. But as I said as well in a previous interview to some of your colleagues here in Vilenica, or virtually here in Vilenica, I also see the difference between different types of monarchies and the collapse of monarchies. So there was this continental type as one that would be ideally presented by Austro-Hungarian monarchy and its problems, and the other one, which was the monarchy of the overseas development of the influence from for example, France and of course the United Kingdom. Now I think that the current situation of European Union is very much similar to some of the problems that have been connected to the clash between two types of imperial systems, because Europe is slow. European Union is sort of slow in its decisions, and somehow it inherited this bureaucratic system of the Austro-Hungarian Empire that has certainly had its good parts. It has developed some dark parts of the Austro-Hungarian imperial territory by building houses, by introducing schooling systems, and so on. And it reminds me of the idea of the new Europe, which is trying to make this bureaucratic belt around what is going on now in this diverse European Union. There are good points in it, but there are also difficulties which I trace back to the clash between two empire systems. Because the overseas empire of the old times, which was more efficient in economical and propagating its economical means, now has found its new face. It's corporatism. The corporatism is the new imperialism that is working by far much efficiently than European bureaucratism. So I see the good points in European Union, which is, as I said, giving the sense of security for us, giving good projects that are ensuring that we can stay together and develop together. But on the other hand, it could collapse for the same reason that Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed in the clash with overseas imperial systems, which are now presented like corporatism, which is more than globalism, because it's not the positive globalism, but the corporal needs of the 0% too of the richest people in the world. So now we have to be very careful about the legacy of Central European systems that have proved to give good results, but that have also brought Europe and Austro-Hungarian Empire to its collapse.
And what is your opinion, like Elena, from the West, if we say it like this in a generalized sense?
Well, thinking about your question and listening to your opinions, I think today the differences between, for example, Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, and Central Europe have less to do with the country you were born or you were live than with other circumstances that have nothing to do with fate, the fate of born in one country or another, your gender, your social class. There is much more common points, I think, between a working class woman born in Spain, Austria, Slovenia, than between a rich man, middle class man, working class man born in the same country. I think we have more in common than we think.
And Miroslav and Yasin, what about the position from the East?
I can continue the story about my project with Anna Blandiana, because it was really important for me, for example, because Romania is our neighbor, yes, but we know nothing about Romania, about Romanian literature. And with Anna, we found out that we have not only geographical similarities, but also the same complexes and funny traumas of our literary processes. For example, the absence of the Nobel laureates, yes? All the Nobel laureates are from Poland, yes? And I had a great nostalgia when I heard Anna's poetry. She has a poem about the ships that coming down from the Carpathian Mountains, yes? The thing is that I was born in 100 kilometers from Romania, yes? And I also saw the ships from my side of the mountains. Central Europe is tightened with numerous images and metaphors similar to these ships and mountains. And first of all, we have the same trauma. For many countries from Eastern Bloc, yes, we have the same trauma, the trauma of socialism, at contemporary wars, genocides, and that things which Milan Kundera called a laboratory of twilight, yes, about Central Europe of the middle of previous century. And all these things are connected with this trauma, yes, and we still battle with this.
Yasin, do you share this position? Is it similar to yours, as Miroslav was talking about? You're on mute.
Sorry. When I think of Central Europe, I'm thinking of course, of Vienna and Austro-Hungarian Empire and its legacy, but also about how the geographical center has somehow become a periphery, and also how the new center is kind of shifting, or maybe we're not entirely sure where it is now, maybe in Brussels, maybe not, maybe in corporations which are constantly eluding and are based in like some shady tax havens. So I'm also thinking, excluding Austria, that Central Europe has this very interesting perspective, having experienced both socialism and extreme neoliberal capitalism, and maybe it's a good idea for the European Union to listen to those voices and to learn from them, because I think it could be a good strategy to take the good things from both systems and to ignore the bad ones. And I think what my country has done in the last 30 years, unfortunately, is taking the worst sides from both systems. And that's why people are on the street now.
Well, slowly we will have to conclude. Otherwise, I guess you will murder me, because I'm like here already forcing you to talk for 2 hours. But as I said, you're amazing, interesting authors. I could ask you many, many other questions, but of course, 1 hour, 2 hours is not enough. Unfortunately, this year we are virtually. If we would meet in person, we could have some glass of wine and debate further on. So I would, for conclusion, like to thank you for this debate. Thank you also for sharing all the experiences that you had in the past with residency program, exchanging program, different festivals. Also that we open some really problematical questions, since we are in effect allies in literature and art, and we are fighting for the better future. For the end, because of course Vilenica is still the festival of meeting the authors, and festivals always means networking, socializing. If some of you would like to ask someone else a question, get to know each other a bit more, this is the time. And also if someone would like to read a short poem or excerpt for the work, you can now. And if you're too tired and you're really running to the protest, that you have to run to the protest, you can, of course, we can also conclude. As you prefer.
I'm not running to the protest, and it's going on late, so I can
okay.
I can wait to hear what the others have to read if they're going to read.
Because I'm really saddened about the situation that we cannot be like really together in person and talk much more. We are limited in time, and it is important, of course, aspect that you get to know each other as well. So if you have some questions for each other, you can do it now, or read something.
I don't have a question, but I just I have to express my satisfaction with this session, because I met some people that I didn't have a chance to meet before, and and it's thanks to you. Although we cannot join with a glass of wine right now, or stay connected by going out and taking a promenade around Vilenica, I still think that we can share our email addresses, and we can try to continue with some regional projects. So that's what I'm suggesting, that you just distribute our emails, and perhaps we can go on with some perhaps not so official debates, but we can arrange something. And I really appreciate the chance to continue talking with all of you. That's what I wanted to say. I didn't have enough time to know you as writers, and you don't know me. I can just hope that we can stay in touch.
Hear, hear. I agree. Thank you. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I also agree with this idea. After we finish this, I will write you an email to all of you. Thank you again, and of course, connect us all together. Thank you. And from my point, I'm really sorry if we didn't have time to actually touch some other thematics or like some specific of your work, but we will continue later on over the email correspondence. Thank you so much for being the guest of Vilenica 2020, and I'm sending hugs to all the parts of Europe that you currently are.
Thank you,
Thank you
Aljaž.
so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.